This story took place just last year. It was in December, just a few weeks before Christmas. I live in a large neighborhood in a house with my wife and 2 young children. One evening, my wife met up with one of her best friends. Her best friend's kids are around the same ages as ours, and they all went to spend time together. My wife told me this while I was at work and asked me to set up the Christmas lights when I got home. I told her that I would do it, and I wanted to surprise the kids with them when they got home. We had gotten a little bit of snow already, but the weather wasn't too cold, so it was a good night to do it. We had several lawn decorations, but the hardest part was hanging up the lights from the roof. I would have to take out the ladder and climb up onto the roof for that. So that day, when I got home from work, almost instantly, I went to the garage and got everything that I needed. It was dark out by then, and I first set up some of the things in our front yard. Then I got the ladder and went on top of the roof. The lights went all the way around our house, on both sides, in the front and back of it. When I got around towards the back side of the house and I was still on top of the roof, I heard a noise coming from below. I didn't know what it was at first, but it sounded like somebody was back there. Even though it was dark out, I had a pretty good view of my surroundings. When I looked, I finally saw that there was a man standing sort of near our house, behind it. I had never seen him before, and he was not a neighbor that I was aware of. I didn't know what this guy was doing in my backyard. I saw him walk closer to me. I called out, asking who he was and what he was doing, but he didn't answer. Instead, he started running towards my ladder. It was a ways down, probably about 20 feet. There was no way that I was going to get there before him. The guy then took my ladder and knocked it down. Now I had no way of getting off of the roof. Then he walked around to the back door, which I had left unlocked. He then entered our house. I was angry, but tried to remain calm. Luckily, I did have my cell phone on me. I dialed 911 and told them about what had happened. Then I just had to wait for them to arrive and hope that the man did not destroy my house or steal anything. I yelled down to him that I called the police, hoping that it would scare him off. I really didn't hear anything though. I wasn't sure where the guy was or what he was doing. Then, probably 2 or 3 minutes later, the guy suddenly left. He came running out of my house at about full speed. He ran through the backyard and then hopped the fence which connected my yard with my neighbor's. After leaping it, he kept running and very quickly was completely out of my sight. I was glad to see him gone and didn't notice him holding anything as he ran. He very well could have stolen something small and put it in his pocket or still damaged something, but overall this was a relief. Just a few minutes after that, the police showed up. They were able to get my ladder and help me get down from the roof. Then they searched my house and property and said that they would look around in the nearby area for the man. I didn't have a great description of him, but I told them what I could. The crazy part is after searching the house, nothing was messed up and nothing was stolen either. That really surprised me. I still don't know why he entered my house or was even in my yard, and after the police left, I finished putting my lights up, but was very careful. The guy never came back. I finished on time before my wife and kids returned home. After that, nothing like that has happened since. We still live there, and I recently put out all the decorations again. This year, things went much smoother. I just want to start off by saying that Christmas is my favorite holiday. But every year, I remember what happened to my family and I on Christmas years ago. I was 12 years old at the time, and I went to my cousin's house with my family to celebrate. On Christmas Eve, my family and I decided to stay the night at my cousin's house because our house was sort of far away. There were guest bedrooms for my family and I to sleep in, but I woke up at about 4 a.m. When I did, I heard noises downstairs, so I decided to go check it out. I went downstairs, and when I did, I saw someone dressed as Santa Claus. I saw him looking around in the kitchen and looking for gifts under the Christmas tree. There wasn't that many Christmas presents left because my family and I had opened most of them, but there were still a few left under the Christmas tree. I went back upstairs and woke up my dad. He came downstairs with me, but there was no one inside the house. My dad told me I had just had a bad dream. I decided to go back to sleep, and in the morning when everyone was up, we were getting ready to eat breakfast. My uncle went in the basement to go get some drinks, when he said he saw the basement window was shattered and it looked like someone had climbed in. My uncle called the cops, and when the cops came, they couldn't find any other evidence other than the broken window. My whole family was scared. My uncle and dad checked the whole house to make sure nothing was stolen. After a while, my uncle and dad came running downstairs and came into the kitchen where we all were and said they heard something in the attic. They went back upstairs to check it out, and shortly after that, they started yelling because they saw the man that I had seen dressed as Santa Claus hiding behind a bunch of boxes. They called the police once again, and all of us went outside to wait for the cops to arrive. When the police came, the officers went running inside and pulled the man out of the attic. They found that he had a knife and tape in his pockets. The officer said it wasn't just him breaking into our house, but there had been multiple reports of someone dressed as Santa Claus walking near people's houses in the area, and we were the fourth call. The officers also told us that I'm a 20-year-old female, and 2 years ago, my family was having my aunt and cousins over for Christmas. The day before Christmas Eve, I went to a nearby shopping center to get my aunt a last-minute gift. I really had no idea what to get her, but I was finally able to find a nice hat that I was sure she would like. I was looking around the store before leaving, and a man approached me. He was much older than me, but appeared to be maybe in his 30s. He had a shaved head and just immediately seemed kind of creepy. He walked right up to me and asked me how I was doing. I told the man I was good and I was just about to leave. At that point, he asked me where I was going and if I wanted to get some drinks with him. I told him no thanks and then started to walk away. But the man followed me as I did and asked me what was wrong and why I didn't want to go with him. It was clear to me that he was going to keep following me. So eventually, I stopped and turned to him and told him in a firm voice to stop following me. Thankfully, the store was pretty crowded and some people appeared to look over a little bit. The man stepped back and said fine and then walked away. I carefully stayed in the store for a while and then left to make sure that the man wouldn't follow me or anything like that. I got the hat for my aunt and then left the store to go to my car. I got in and began to drive away. But as I started to drive, I noticed an older-looking van with the man sticking his head out of the window at me and smiling in the creepiest way possible. It gave me the chills as I drove off, and I was once again careful to make sure that he didn't follow me. I was able to make it back home all right, and the man didn't follow me. But I just feel lucky with how busy the store was, because the way that man was smiling at me was completely insane. Christmas, everyone's favorite time of the year. It was certainly my favorite time of the year until one night that changed everything. And that one night changed my life forever. The Christmas of 2018, I was sitting in my living room watching the snow get heavier and heavier. I was enjoying myself drinking a cup of hot cocoa until I heard a knock at my door. I thought, who could it be at this hour? It was 1:18 in the morning. I got up to open the door, and to my surprise, I saw nobody. I closed the door, thinking I was being ding-dong ditched, or it was all in my head. 5 minutes later, another knock on my door. I once again got up to open the door, and when I saw nobody, I sighed and shut it. Almost immediately after, another knock on my door, and this time, I was quick enough to swing the door open, and I could just get a glimpse of a kid. He looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, running towards a house that was adjacent to mine. Surprisingly, I never knew who lived there, and quite frankly, I never seemed to care. However, this time I wanted to know why such a little kid was roaming out in the middle of the night, so I planned to go over there the next morning. Morning finally came, and I headed towards the house where I was sure I saw the little boy run into. When I knocked on the door, nobody answered. I figured they weren't home and I would come back later. That evening, I tried going back to the house and once again knocked. There was no answer again. I thought to myself this was quite strange. I then tried the door angle, and to my surprise, the door wasn't locked. Curiosity got the better of me, and I unlawfully entered the house knowing I was breaking and entering. As soon as I entered the house, I smelled something foul in the air, the smell of rotting meat. The inside of this house looked like nobody had lived there for years. I decided to check the upstairs of this house, and once I climbed up the stairs to the top step, I saw there were 5 bedrooms adjacent to each other. I checked out the one to my right, which was nothing special, just a bed and a closet. I checked out the rest of the bedrooms and found nothing. Great, I thought to myself, this was a complete waste of my time. Just as I was about to leave though, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It startled me. I knew I was caught red-handed, but just as I could say anything, I saw it was a woman and she put her hand over my mouth and shushed me. I slowly backed away and then sprinted back to my house. As I did, I heard the blood-curdling scream of the woman telling me to come back. I got back to my house and decided not to do anything. At 3 a.m., I woke up to sounds outside my window. I looked out and saw the same woman staring back at me with a wide smile that ran across her face. Her crazed eyes stared back at me on the other side of the glass. I fell back in shock and then dialed 911. Cops were at my location within minutes. I had told them what happened and they went to the house across the street. They searched it and found nothing. They told me there were no signs of anyone there since the horrifying murder that had took place in that very house. I was shocked. I hadn't heard of anything happening at all in that house, as it was an ongoing investigation. The cops were not able to give me the information I so desperately wanted to know. The next day, I did some research, and what I found made me sick. On December 31st, a mother and her son were brutally murdered inside that very house. December 31st, I linked everything together and stared at myself in the mirror in pure horror. The events that took place to this day have changed me forever. In the next 8 months, I quit my job and had to get therapy for the rest of the year. I would wake up at late hours of the night to see the woman's crazed smile staring back at me, and I would scream in pure horror. It's been a year since this traumatizing experience, and I'm still recovering.
For some background on the story, I'm a female, and I live alone in a house. I live about 5 minutes away from my parents' house, and I go there for most holidays. A few years ago, during Christmas, I had plans to go to my parents' as usual. In the meantime, I had decorated my entire house with Christmas decorations pretty much right after Thanksgiving. I love getting into the holiday spirit, and I got a tree, nutcrackers, and all kinds of other things. I was playing Christmas music in my house almost every day. The weekend before Christmas, I hosted a Christmas party at my house with my friend group. We did a little gift exchange and things like that. Fast forward to Christmas Eve, several days later. I woke up in the morning at 8 a.m. This is later than I usually have to get up because I had off of work. I felt so refreshed and I got out of bed and made some coffee. As I was doing so, I looked out and noticed a single gift under my Christmas tree. It was a green box that was sort of large and it looked poorly wrapped. The present had a bow on it as well. I was confused. I was sure I hadn't seen it before. I thought for a moment maybe it was left over from the Christmas party I had, but I was sure that I would have seen it. The gift was right under the tree and in very plain sight. I walked over to it and examined it. My name was written on it with a smile face drawn next to my name. I wondered how on earth it got there, and I decided to open it. When I did, it was a cardboard box. I opened that, which contained a handwritten note, and then a few random flowers and a winter hat. The hat was one that I already had though. I was really confused and I read the note. It said, "Merry Christmas. I got flowers just for you, even though you didn't invite me to your party last week. It looked like fun. By the way, here's your hat back. You left it outside." I was so confused after reading this, and a creeped out feeling came over me. Was this some kind of a joke or something? I took a picture of it and put it in the group chat that I had with my friends. They were really quick to all deny it, which I believed. It didn't seem like something any of them would do. But more importantly, how did this get inside of my house? I walked back over to the kitchen. When I did, I suddenly thought that I heard a noise coming from inside my house. I froze in place. I didn't know if I was being paranoid or if I actually had heard something. Then I heard it again. I could tell exactly where that noise was coming from. It was from the closet down in my hallway. I walked quickly but calmly to the front door, grabbed my keys, then walked outside. Then I got into my car and left. I drove to my parents' house and told them everything. We called the police, who then went to my house. A short time later, I was told they had found a man hiding inside. It was a huge relief to hear that he had been caught. It turns out some guy had started stalking me and I didn't even know it. He apparently broke in through the window that was behind my Christmas tree, so I hadn't noticed that it was broken. After breaking into my house, he placed his gift and then hid in my hallway closet. I'm so lucky that I left when I did, because I don't know what that man's intentions were.
This happened on Christmas Eve, just last year. I'm 22 and recently graduated from college. Each year on Christmas Eve, my family goes to my uncle's house for a get-together. Then on Christmas, everybody comes to our house. Last year, unfortunately for me, I had to work on Christmas Eve. I had a job at a department store in a nearby city to where we live. It was a part-time job that I worked mostly in the summer or whenever I was back home from school. I would be getting paid extra, but would have to miss the family gathering at my uncle's. We closed slightly early at about 8 p.m. instead of the usual 10 p.m. My uncle's place was almost an hour away though, so even if I wanted to drive there right after work, it would be kind of late, and I decided not to. Instead, I went back to my parents' house where I lived, and was all by myself. I got back home after work at about 8:30. I remember not long after I returned home, I texted with my parents, and they were probably going to be staying at my uncle's until almost midnight. I made some food, and then relaxed and went into the living room and put on a movie. Everything was going well until about 11 o'clock at night. Out of nowhere, there were some loud bangs on the front door. It was very startling. I sat up and didn't even want to look to see who was there. The noises continued. It was like whoever was there was pounding as hard as they possibly could on the front door. After probably 10 seconds, I walked over to a window that overlooked the front door. I was upstairs and on the second floor, and when I got to the window, very carefully looked outside. I peeled back the window cover ever so slightly. When I did, I saw 3 large-looking men wearing dark-colored jackets and dark hats. I couldn't see any of their faces. They were standing around the door, and one of them was knocking on it. The bad feeling that I had became much worse. I had no idea what to do. I ran out of the room and called my parents. I told them about the situation, and my parents did not know who the men could possibly be. They said to call the police if the men didn't leave, and they told me that they would leave to come home now. Still, it would probably be 45 minutes before they got back. The knocking at the door finally stopped. I looked out the window and saw all of the men now running around to the back. This was not good. I moved towards the back of the house to try to see where the men were going. Within a minute, I heard the doorknobs to one of the back doors rattling. They were trying to get inside now. That was followed by a loud banging at the other back door that we had. I dialed 911 and tried to stay calm, even though I was completely freaking out. The men stayed near the back of the house. Then things went quiet for probably 2 or 3 minutes. I thought that maybe the men had left, but was too scared to look out of a window and see. But the silence was broken by more loud bangs, this time coming from a window. This was really bad, because I didn't think the window would hold up, and they would eventually break it. Probably 30 seconds after this, I heard the sound of a car pulling into our driveway. It had to be the police. The noises from the window suddenly stopped. I decided to look out the back window now. When I did, I saw all 3 men sprinting through our backyard. They were running to the back end of it, where we had a few trees, and then there was a quiet road. Very quickly, they went out of sight, and when I looked to the front and saw the police were there, I rushed out and told them about the men and that they were running away. Unfortunately, all of the men were pretty fast, and were long gone by the time the police started looking for them. I'm not sure where they came from or where they went, but they were gone now. The police still looked around and asked me a few questions. Not long after that, my parents got home. I felt much better not being there alone anymore. After the police left, we stayed up late making sure that the guys didn't return, and luckily, they didn't. That was one of the scariest experiences I've ever had.
This story takes place on one of the best nights for kids around America, but the worst night for me. It was Christmas Eve of 2019. For a little backstory, 3 or 4 months before this event took place, I broke up with my girlfriend. Let's call her Jennifer. The event that caused me to break up with her was she stole over $900 from me. I caught her, and all she said before she left is, "This isn't over." Fast forward 3 months to Christmas Eve. Since we live in Texas and have a house in the hill country, every year on Christmas my family usually goes there to celebrate. However, this year I couldn't make it because I had to work. I was 17 years old and had just got a job at my local supermarket, and I had to work all day of Christmas. I stayed home, but I had no problem with being alone. On Christmas Eve night, it was getting late, probably 11 o'clock or so. I decided to take a shower and go to bed as I needed to get up early the next day. As I started to shower, I heard a strange noise from the garage, sort of like a metallic banging. I thought the noise was coming from the heater because I had put the water as hot as it would go. I took my shower, and when I finished, I went to go get in bed. As I did, I heard the noise again, although this time it was on the other side of the yard. I was confused because I didn't think there was anything over there. I went to go look out the window and see. I looked out and didn't see anything but my backyard, completely empty. I completely disregarded it because my backyard is pretty flat and empty, and it has nowhere for someone to hide. Now it's hard to explain, but my window is fairly large, and it has a blind spot to the left where there's a corner. Somebody could easily hide there, but I was tired and I didn't think about that at all. As I walked off, I heard a bang again, but this time on the window of my house, and as I looked out the window, I saw the figure of a person dressed in all black standing at my window. It made me jump. However, I wasn't too scared as I'm a fairly large dude and a high school football player. This all changed when the person at the window reached for his pocket for what I assume was a gun. I ran away from the window towards my parents' room to go retrieve my dad's shotgun. I knew he kept it in a safe and had the safe key under his pillow. As I was running to retrieve it, I dialed 911. As soon as the dispatcher answered, I heard the horrific sound of glass shattering. I made it to my parents' room and shut the door quietly. I whispered into the phone what was happening to the dispatcher. She said to stay on the line as the county sheriff was en route, but it would take about 5 minutes or so. I told her I was going to retrieve the shotgun. She said that's not a bad idea, but to only use it if I had to, and to use it with caution. I quickly realized my dad took the gun with him to the hill country because they were going to a gun range. I informed the dispatcher that the gun was gone. She said to make sure to stay on the line. For a moment, everything was silent, and I thought that maybe the burglar or whoever was in my house got spooked when they realized someone was home. My heart sank into my chest when I heard not one, but 2 sets of boots walking up the stairs. I heard a heavy metal pole scraping across the floor. I locked and barricaded the door to my parents' room. Then I almost passed out when I heard one of them talk, not in any voice but Jennifer's. She said, "Merry Christmas, Tommy." Then I heard a male voice mockingly say, "We know you're in there." Then they knocked on the door of my parents' room. I almost screamed and got underneath the bed. Jennifer then said, "Don't worry if you don't open the door. We'll open it for you." I heard the pole hit the door and the lock started jiggling. I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from being too loud. Then, all of a sudden, I heard police sirens and Jennifer muttering curse words. They ran down the stairs to try to leave out the front door when I heard someone yell, "Freeze." I heard a bunch of yelling, and then an officer come in and announce himself and tell anybody in the house to make themselves known. I called out to him saying that I was Tommy, and I dialed 911. He told me to come out slowly with my hands visible. As I left my parents' room, I saw the 2 being escorted out in handcuffs. The rest of my night consisted of paperwork and me talking to my parents, who were making a 3-hour drive to come home and be with me. This incident was very disturbing to me, and I'm grateful that I reacted the way that I did. Had I not, I may not be here right now.
Christmas has always been my favorite holiday of the year, a time where your dreams are meant to come true. Well, this story I'm about to tell you happened to me around 27 years ago. I'm 34 now. It all started 2 days before Christmas. My parents needed to get some last-minute Christmas shopping in before the big day arrived, and my parents dropped me off at one of those North Pole Santa grottos in the center of the mall. They told me they would take just about 15 minutes.
I sighed and started to walk over to the stereotypical mall Santa. White, long beard, big red coat, and everything you can expect from Santa Claus. The line wasn't too long, so I easily got my turn with Santa in less than a few minutes. The man, looking to be in his 60s with his Santa beard looking like it hadn't been washed in weeks, called me over to him and sat me on his knee. He asked me what it was I wanted for Christmas. I replied saying I just wanted the new Nintendo. It was one of the early Nintendos at the time, and every kid wanted it. The old man replied with a very strange answer that hit me by surprise. He asked me for my home address so he could, quote, know where to deliver my gift. And of course, I fell for his trick, as I was only 7 at the time and believed in all the magical fantasies that Santa Claus was going to visit me on Christmas Day. I gave him my address and he dismissed me. He gave me one last smile and wave as I ran off into the crowd to meet my parents, who were now in the clothing store next to the grotto. I wish this is where my story ended, but what happened on Christmas Eve still haunts me to this day. I woke up to a dark and quiet room. It was still pitch black outside, with the winter snow piling up my bedroom window. I was dehydrated and felt like I needed to get a glass of water downstairs from the kitchen before I tried to get more sleep. However, it struck me that I would have to go past the Christmas tree to get to the kitchen. My parents always said that I'm not allowed in the living room until the morning, because Santa would see me. The thirst overcame me, and I forced myself out of my room and into the balcony overlooking the living room. But something caught my eye. There was this very tall person in a long red robe wearing the same Santa hat. He also had a big red sack of presents. I quietly opened the door into my 5-year-old sister's room to wake her and tell her that Santa was here. But when I entered the room, she was gone. This surprised me, as she normally won't leave her room like this at this time of night. I made my way back to the balcony, and I watched in horror as 3 men who all appeared to be in their late 30s were wearing elf costumes, and they entered the room. I saw my sister being given a gift from the guy dressed up as Santa, and the 3 other men leading her outside of the front door. I screamed and yelled. All 4 of the men backed out of the door, leaving my sister in tears. Not realizing the situation, I told her the story and forced her not to tell our parents. Then I put her back in her room. I made my way back to my room and went to sleep, forgetting all about the water. I just wanted to pretend like the night never happened. To this day, I still don't know what happened, but I never saw that dirty old Santa at the mall again. However, I'm sure that it was him at my house that night.
This happened years ago when I was in high school. At the time, we were having Christmas at our house. My grandparents, a few aunts and uncles, and cousins were all coming over to our house. We had our whole house all decorated, and some of our family had been in town for a few days and were staying at our house because we had 2 extra rooms. There were a handful of presents wrapped and under the tree, but a majority of the present wrapping happened on Christmas Eve. I had recently gotten my first job earlier in that year, so I was really excited about the gifts that I had gotten for everyone. Some I had put under the tree already, but there were a couple that were hidden in my room so that nobody would see them. We wrapped presents on Christmas Eve and all hung out late into Christmas Eve night, and everyone got to bed kind of late. I went up in my room and played some video games for a while because I wasn't quite sleepy yet. I ended up staying up pretty late though. It was 2 a.m. and I was about to go to sleep when I realized that I hadn't put my last few presents under the tree. They were already wrapped, but I had them hidden in my bedroom closet. I went and retrieved them and then left my bedroom to place them under the Christmas tree. When I left my bedroom, I saw that the house was all dark and quiet, aside from a little nightlight on the wall that we had up there. I walked down the stairs and then into the living room. It was a little bit brighter there due to the lights on the Christmas tree. I added my presents to the many that were already laid out under the tree. As I turned to go back up the stairs, I heard a noise suddenly. It was so quiet that the noise startled me quite a bit. It was coming from the back of the house. I walked over to see what was going on. As I did, I thought I heard rattling from the back door leading to the patio. It seemed like somebody was going to come through the back door into the house. I entered the kitchen, which is where the back door led to, and turned on the light. As I did, I saw the door opening. I jumped back and heard a noise as if now somebody was running away outside. After I gathered myself, I realized that nobody was there and whoever had been there left. I walked over and looked outside. I didn't see anybody, so I shut the door and locked it. The door must have been left unlocked or something.
Our back door was rarely used by us, so that must have been the case. Maybe one of my cousins or somebody used it and never thought to lock it up at night. Either way, I was terrified by what I had just witnessed. I went around making sure all the other doors in the house were locked. After doing so, I was confident whoever tried to get into the house was now gone, and I went back and turned off all the lights, then went upstairs to go to bed. I got into my bedroom again and turned out the lights. When I got into my bed, I happened to pull back the curtain and glance out my window. My window overlooked the side yard of our house. What I saw was a man walking from our front yard going into the back. My heart started racing. This had to be the same person that tried to break in. I ran out of my room and back downstairs. As I did, I turned on every light that I could. I got back down to the kitchen and turned the light on again, hoping this would deter the man. And it seemed to work. I heard sounds as if the man was walking away through the snow near the back door area once again. I looked out the front window and just barely saw the guy walking away down the street. Then I left the lights on and went back up to bed again. This time, I looked out my window and didn't see the man. I figured he was gone for good now, and finally I was able to fall asleep. The next morning was Christmas, and when I woke up, I could already hear family downstairs talking, and when I went downstairs, my mother asked me if I had left the lights on. I told her yes, and then explained why. A few of us went outside, and we found out that the lock on our back door had somehow been broken. It wasn't working at all, so even when it looked like the door was locked from the inside, it wasn't really locked from the outside. That's how the guy had opened up the door. What scares me is that when I went back downstairs that night, I didn't know that the guy could have just walked right in if he wanted, and I wouldn't be able to stop him. I'm grateful that turning on the lights did, and I wonder what would have happened if I didn't.
This happened many years ago when I was a little boy. It was Christmas time, and my family and I lived on the first floor of a large apartment complex. I remember one day on a Saturday, my mom told me that Santa was at our apartment. We went to the event room that our apartment had, and they were doing a Meet Santa type of thing. There wasn't a whole lot of people there, but those who lived nearby and had kids would bring them to see Santa. We went there and got in line, and then my sister and I met Santa. I remember when it was my turn, he asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I told him I wanted the new PlayStation. He asked me if I live here, and I told him yes, I lived right down the hall. He then told me he would see what he could do about getting me that PlayStation, and gave me a candy cane. We then went back home. I think we made some holiday cookies or something. I don't quite remember that well, but where the story really gets interesting is later that night. I was in my bed and not really that sleepy, so I was just laying there playing on my Game Boy. I was in the middle of a level in my game when I heard a noise come from my window, which was literally right next to my bed. I looked up through the blinds, which were open so that you could see through them. I saw Santa standing right outside my window, and it really shocked me. He motioned for me to open the window, and I did. He then smiled at me and asked if I remembered him. I told him yes, and he handed me another candy cane. He told me he wanted to show me his sleigh. I knew something felt off about this situation. I didn't really think Santa was supposed to show up at my window like this, because it wasn't Christmas Eve yet, it was like a week before. But he was Santa after all, so I told him I'd like to see it. He told me to come out the window, and so I opened it wider. As I was about to climb out the window, the door to my room opened. It was my mother, and when she saw what was going on, she ran to me and grabbed me. When she did, Santa turned and ran away into the night. She asked me what was going on, and when I explained it to her, she told me that the man at my window was not really Santa, but just an imposter pretending to be him. She then called the police, but by the time they got there, the man was long gone. I was young, but when I spoke to my mom about the incident in recent years, she told me based on the information of the man dressed as Santa who was at the apartment that day, they were able to locate the man and he was caught. I'm so glad that my mom came into my room when she did. This is a story that took place back when I was a kid. I was probably somewhere between the ages of 8 and 10. At that age, I loved Christmas, mainly because of all the things that I would get. I lived with my parents, brother, and sister in a 2-story home in a typical neighborhood. Each year, we would do lots of decorating inside and outside of the house. Our Christmas tree would go in the corner of our living room, and all the presents would go underneath it. On Christmas Eve that year, we went to my grandparents' house, and then we were going to my uncle's on Christmas. That night on Christmas Eve, after we all went to bed, I had a difficult time falling asleep. I usually did when I was a kid because I was always so excited for Christmas. I finally was able to doze off for a bit, but woke up sometime later when it was still the night. I remember just turning over to try to go back to sleep, but then I thought I heard a noise. It sounded like it was coming from downstairs. My bedroom was the closest to the stairs, and even I could barely hear it. I looked at the clock, and it was 2 a.m. I didn't know why anybody would be up at this hour. Being that young and a curious kid, I decided to go and look. I left my bedroom and then walked a few feet to the railing of the stairs that overlooked the living room. I looked down, and everything seemed normal. All of the lights were off, but the lights from the Christmas tree and the few other decorations were on, so I could see a little bit. I looked down at the tree for a little while longer. It was very large, and we always got the biggest tree that we could find. But then I saw somebody come out from behind the tree. It wasn't my dad or brother, but a random guy that I didn't know. As soon as I realized that it was a random guy, I turned and ran. I went to the end of the hallway where my parents' bedroom was. I woke them up and told them that there was some guy in the house. I remember that my dad got up to look. He came back a short time later and said that he saw somebody leaving the house through the window. The police were called, and when they got out to our house, searched all over our property. They didn't find the guy, but they did find that our window was broken. None of us had heard it break, so the guy must have quietly done it somehow. It was a living room window that was broken, and I think that I saw him not long after he got in the house, because nothing was even stolen. I think that he either saw me or heard me, and that scared him off. I'm just really glad that he didn't try to come upstairs or anything. It still really freaked me out knowing that somebody broke in. It took me a long time to be able to fall back asleep, but eventually I was able to. That was by far my craziest Christmas experience. Nothing like that has happened since, much less on Christmas. I still don't know who the guy was though and why he chose our house. I also don't know if the police ever found him.
This happened many years ago. It was Christmas time, and I went to Dollar Tree to do my Christmas shopping. I had several people that I needed to buy gifts for, and when I got to the store, it was pretty busy. There were a lot of other people around, probably also doing their Christmas shopping. So I shopped around and I found quite a few great gifts for people that I knew they would love. After being inside for maybe 30 minutes or so, I was just about done. At one point though, I remember hearing some yelling and commotion from the other side of the store. I walked over there to see what it was, but it cleared up before I got to the area. So then I finished my shopping and I headed to the checkout. When I got there, I put my items on the conveyor belt, and I was getting quite a few things. I remember that when the cashier started scanning the items, some guy with a basket of stuff walked up right behind me. He then dumped out his basket, mixing his items with mine. The cashier was so busy scanning things that she didn't really notice the guy doing it, and she was going to start scanning his stuff too. His items were mixed with mine, and it seemed like he was trying to get me to buy all his stuff. I stopped everything, telling them both to hold up. I asked the guy what on earth he was doing. He said that he didn't have enough money to pay for all his stuff, so he needed me to get them for him. I told him that if he didn't have the money, not to buy so much stuff. I took all his things and put them back in a basket and made it clear that I was not going to pay for them. The man then took his stuff and walked away. Then the cashier finished scanning my items, and I got them in 2 bags and started walking away. I left the store and went into the parking lot. I was walking to my car when all of a sudden I heard footsteps quickly approaching me from behind. Before I could even look back, they reached me, and I felt somebody try grabbing the bag that was in my left hand. I must have good reflexes because I jerked the bag away and I was able to hold on to it. I then saw the man from inside. He had tried taking my bag from me, and I moved it away from him and asked him what he was doing. The guy just turned around and then went back inside the Dollar Tree. I was convinced at that point that he was either on drugs or there was something wrong with him. After that, I was able to get inside my car and go home. The next day, I saw on the news that police had been at the Dollar Tree. Apparently, the same man punched 2 people inside before the police were called, and he ended up being caught. That must have taken place very shortly after I had left. I'm really glad that he didn't beat me up or anything. It was a really crazy experience, to say the least. This happened just last year. I was going last-minute Christmas shopping to find a couple of gifts. I had bought stuff for everyone, but I felt like a few of my gifts were just kind of lame, so I went out to the mall to see if I could find anything else. It was the day before Christmas Eve, so the mall was packed. There were cars everywhere in the parking lot, and when I got inside the mall, I saw that it was just as busy in there. This mall was pretty large, and it had many of the popular stores and restaurants. I started out by going to a few of the usual stores that I went to typically when I was there. I did end up finding a couple of good gifts throughout the first couple of stores. I kept on shopping though, and when I was in my third store of the day, which was a clothing store, I noticed this one woman in there. I didn't think anything of her at all, but when I saw her in the next store that I was shopping in, that's when I realized that she was there too. A few stores later, and I saw her again, this time looking at me, and she was walking a ways behind me. I still considered this a coincidence. That is, until I was walking in one of the mall walkways between stores, and I saw the woman walking a ways back behind me. She was fairly short and wore a black jacket and sunglasses. I got the idea that she might be following me for some reason. I decided to randomly stop and then just stand around as if I was going to a nearby coffee shop. The woman stopped as well, and this confirmed it to me. I wasn't really sure what to do though. I had no clue why she would be following me. I decided to just ignore her and keep shopping. I went to about 3 more stores. Occasionally, I would look around or behind me and typically would see the woman. I wasn't sure if she knew that I knew she was following me or not. Eventually, I was finally done shopping after being in the mall for probably about 2 hours. I walked over to the exits near the parking lot where my car was parked. When I got out to the doors, I saw the woman behind me was going to leave as well. Now, I was a little bit concerned that she was going to follow me home in her car or something like that. When I got outside the mall, I literally sprinted into the parking lot and ducked behind the first car that I saw. It might sound crazy to you, because it kind of sounds crazy to me now as I'm writing this, but that's what came to my mind at the time. I barely saw the woman walking out, and I used the many cars in the parking lot to shield myself from her vision. I walked between rows of cars, ducking down, as the woman walked closer and seemed to be looking around. It's as if she knew I was hiding, because she had either seen me run behind a car, or she knew I wouldn't disappear that quickly out of her sight. Slowly and carefully, I inched closer to where my car was parked. I knew the woman was nearby, but I couldn't see her. Finally, I saw my car in sight. I was even more careful to get close to it, and when I reached it, I got inside the back door and then ducked down in the back seat so I wouldn't be seen. I carefully looked out the window and saw the woman a little ways away. I watched her stand around there for a good 3 or 4 minutes until I saw a car drive up and the woman get inside of it. Then they left. I never found out why she was following me for such a long time.
This is something that happened when I was Christmas shopping a couple of years ago. It was one of the final weekends before Christmas, and I had a lot of things to buy. I went shopping all by myself and went to a very large mall that was sort of close to where I live. When I got there, it was extremely busy and remained that way the entire time. Just about everywhere that I went inside, I had to wait in line to check out. I was there for several hours, but eventually was able to get just about everything that I wanted. It was mostly gifts for friends and family. When I was finally done shopping, I left the mall and drove home. Everything seemed to have gone well. Now, when I was on the way home and probably about halfway back, my cell phone started to ring. I looked and did not recognize the number, so I didn't answer it. But just a short time later, I saw that whoever had called me left a voicemail. I got curious, so I decided to play it right then and there. When I did, I heard a man's voice speaking. The way he spoke was sort of creepy and unsettling. He told me that he was driving behind me right now and that I should have answered the phone. I looked behind me. I was on the highway and there were a lot of other cars, plus it was dark out. There was a car directly behind me, but I couldn't tell how long it had been back there. I just kept going back on my way home. I was very suspicious and a little nervous, but thought that maybe it could just be a dumb joke. When I turned off the highway to a slightly quieter road, the car behind me did as well. Now I was less than 10 minutes from my house. I kept driving, and when I made the next turn, the car followed. In this kind of a situation, I knew you were supposed to drive to the police if you're being followed. So I took out my phone and asked Siri to direct me to the nearest police station. Soon I had a route, and I followed it. It would only take about 5 minutes to get there. But before I even made it to the street where the police station was on, I noticed that the car stopped following me. I pulled into the police station anyways, but didn't get out of my car. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, making sure that the car didn't come in after me and that it was gone. Then I finally went back on the road and went home. For the rest of my drive, I did not notice the car directly behind me or anything. There were a decent number of other cars on the road, but it wasn't all that busy. Eventually, I got back to my house and pulled in. My street was usually pretty quiet, but as soon as I parked my car in the driveway, my phone started to ring again. I jumped when I heard it. When I looked, it was the same number as before. I decided to answer it. When I did, I heard the same man's voice speak. He said, "You shouldn't have gone to the police station. You should have just went home. I know where you live." This really freaked me out, but just then, things got worse. I suddenly heard a car approaching and saw headlights entering my street. I turned and ran for my house as fast as possible. I got to the door and unlocked it just as the car reached my driveway. It pulled in and parked behind my car, and I made it inside of my house. I locked the door behind me. I took out my phone and called the police. Meanwhile, after parking in my driveway, I saw a man get out and start to walk to my door. I ran back into the living room, which is away from the door. The man then knocked on my front door, and then he tried to open it. After that, he stayed on the front step, just standing there. I really wonder if that guy was crazy. He called me again, but I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail, and he did not leave a message. The good part is that he did not attempt to break in. He just stood there, right outside of my front door, the entire time. Finally, the police got there. They talked to the man and were able to get him to leave, as well as gave him a citation. I hoped that would be enough, though. It was certainly one of the scariest situations in my life. That man was very sneaky. I really don't know how he got my phone number or knew where I lived. I think he waited for me around the corner of the police station or something. Then he kept a distance so I didn't notice him. It was dark out, so I couldn't see all the other cars very well. Either way, whatever he did, it blows my mind he was able to do it. The good news is that I haven't seen him since.
A few years ago, I went Christmas shopping one night by myself. For a little more details, I will also mention that I'm a female. I had already gotten some gifts for family and friends, but I wanted to complete all my shopping, and I had several things still to buy, including a gift for my husband. I ended up getting out of work a little bit early, so I decided to go shopping straight from there. First, I went to a local shopping center that had a few strip malls close to each other. I went to a couple of the stores and spent a bit of time there. After finding a couple of things, I left and walked back to my car in the parking lot. I remember that I was parked pretty much right in the middle of it. When I was about to drive away, I just remember that I noticed there was somebody in a car looking at me. I didn't think much of it, but the car was parked in the next row over and some guy was in the driver's seat just staring in my direction. Within a few seconds though, I looked away and then I drove off. After that, I ended up going to Target, which was just a couple of miles away from there. When I got there, I did some more shopping and was inside the store for a good 30 minutes at least. I got a number of different things, not all gifts for people. But anyways, I left Target and walked out to my car. When I got inside, once more I noticed somebody was looking at me. There was a car parked in a similar distance to the one before, and it looked like the same man was behind the wheel. He was looking at me like before, and that's when I thought that it was really strange. Why would he be here too? I even wondered if he had followed me or something. I wanted to leave right after noticing him, so I started my car and began to drive away. When I left the parking lot, I did not notice the man leaving or anything, so I felt a little bit better. I figured that maybe he had followed me from the strip mall to the Target without me noticing. So I just had one more stop to make after that. I was going to a nearby grocery store on the way home to get a few things for dinner. I stopped there and I parked and then went inside. I got all the things that I needed and I was in the store for maybe 10 to 15 minutes if I had to guess. After I left, I walked out to my car again. When I did, at first, I didn't see anything, but I looked around just to be safe. When I looked around, I just barely noticed the same guy was watching me yet again. He was parked in a spot that was across from mine and similar to the two other times, except it was not as easily visible to where I was because there were a few other cars sort of in the way. When I saw him again, I really couldn't believe it. I was very confused and had no idea what was going on, but I knew that I wanted to get out of there and just go home. So I left and drove away, very careful to watch the car to see if it would follow me. When I made it to the end of the parking lot, once more I did not notice him. He was still parked there when I left, and he quickly was out of my sight. So at that point, I drove the rest of the way home, which was under 10 minutes. I got back, parked my car in the driveway, and went inside. My husband was already home, and then I unloaded all the groceries and stuff. Just after that though, I happened to notice out a window a car pulling over to the side of the street out front. When I did, I realized that it was the same car. That meant the same man was behind the wheel. I had no idea how he found me. I told my husband about what happened and how the car was there. I suggested calling the police, but my husband had other ideas. As soon as he got wind of it, he went over to the closet by the door and he took out his baseball bat. Then he walked out the front door and was going straight for the car. When he made it almost halfway through the yard, the car quickly drove away, screeching the tires in the process. When my husband came back inside, he said that if the man ever returned, he would smash his car. Luckily, he never did. I didn't see that guy again after that. I'm guessing the man following me was hoping that I lived alone and possibly would have broken in. I really don't know for sure though. He must have been able to follow me at a distance without me noticing. When he first saw me though, I'm not sure. I'm just glad that I never saw him again. This story happened 4 years ago on Christmas Eve. I live with my wife sort of out in the country. The houses in my neighborhood are kind of spaced out, and we have a fairly big yard. That's why on Christmas Eve at about 9 p.m. at night, I was really surprised to hear knocking coming from the front door of our house. I walked over to the window to get a look outside and see who was there, but when I looked, there was nobody. I went around to every window that I could, and I looked to see if anybody was outside, but I couldn't see anyone at all, although it was pretty dark out. It was strange to say the least, but I figured it was probably some kind of prank. I thought, what else could it be? We got some snow that night, and the next morning when I woke up, we could see there was a bunch of footprints all over our backyard which hadn't been there the night before. The creepy part was they seemed to be headed towards my shed that I had in the back. I was concerned, so I decided to take a walk out to my shed to see if anything happened to it or if anything was missing inside. I walked out there, and once I arrived, I opened it up. As soon as I did, I saw a man in the corner turn around and then start charging at me. I turned and ran back for my house. Luckily, I was able to make it back inside before the man. I quickly called the police and watched from the window as the man went back into my shed. The police arrived a while later and arrested the man. He turned out to be on drugs and had wandered into the area.
A few years ago, we hosted Christmas at our house. It was my wife and I, and we were having about 15 to 20 family members come over. We have a somewhat large house and also a large backyard. Our house was decorated and ready for the guests on Christmas Day. Everything started out very well. Families started to arrive at roughly 11 o'clock in the morning. I was pretty busy talking to people and stuff, but maybe at about 11:30, something odd happened. One of my cousins arrived, and I went outside to greet him. As he was walking in, he told me that he thought he saw a guy in my backyard and wanted to know if I knew about him. I was confused. Nobody was going outside, and I didn't know why anybody would be in the backyard. I asked him to tell me more about it. He said that when he pulled into my driveway, he noticed a guy walking near the tree line of the woods in the backyard. He thought that it was me at first, but quickly realized that it wasn't. He took a few steps towards the backyard after getting out of his car, but the man quickly went out of sight. We both decided to go over there and look. After walking back to where he spotted the guy, we saw the footprints in the snow, but didn't see anyone. He must have been gone by then. We yelled out into the woods, asking if anybody was there. It was complete silence now, though. I really had no idea who it could be. My neighborhood is pretty quiet, and the houses are spaced out pretty good. But I didn't know what else could be done, so we both just went back inside. After going back in, I quickly forgot all about it and was busy talking to people. For hours, everything was going well. But then, as I was walking past one of the windows that looks out to the backyard, I saw the man myself. He was kind of far away, but I saw a guy walking through the edge of the tree line. This had to be the same person. I yelled for my cousin to come and see. The man in the woods then stopped and seemed to look in my direction. My cousin was walking over, but by the time he got there, the man then darted back into the woods. My cousin saw him for just a split second. He told me that it was the same guy that he had seen earlier though. We kept watching the area, but he did not come back. I still wasn't really sure what to do about it, so we just went back to where everyone else was. I looked to the window a couple of more times, but didn't see the guy. I hoped that maybe he would leave for good. I still couldn't help but wonder what he was doing back there though. Eventually, people left, and it was soon just my wife and I. We looked out the window several more times that night, but there was still nothing. At that point, I felt a lot better about it. The very next morning, I went outside into the backyard. Everything was fine at first, but I soon noticed something strange. The man wasn't back, but there was a new set of footprints in the snow. It was clearly from a person, and it wasn't mine. There had been a fresh layer of snow on Christmas Eve. When my cousin and I walked back there to the woods the day before, we were far away. In fact, I saw those sets of tracks. These went from the woods right to our back door. Then they appeared to go back to the woods. Could the same man have walked to our back door and tried to get in overnight? It creeped me out to think about it. For the next several days, I was very suspicious. But after that, I never saw the guy. I also didn't notice any other strange things happening. I still don't know who the man was and what he was doing. Every year on Christmas Day, we usually host family over at our house. We have a decent-sized place, and most of the family lives nearby. I live here with my wife, and a few years ago we were hosting Christmas like usual. So family members started coming over at around 12 o'clock, and they were mostly parking on the side of the street out front. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet, but not super isolated or anything. When pretty much everyone had gotten there, I remember that somebody told me that there was a random car in the driveway. I walked over to a front window, and I saw this large SUV with really tinted windows just sitting in the driveway. Apparently, it had just recently got there, but hadn't left. Nobody had gotten out of it either. I looked at it and wondered who was driving, because I had never seen the car before. Nobody was getting out, and it wasn't leaving, so I decided to go out and ask. I thought that maybe it was somebody who was lost trying to get to a neighbor's house. That was the most logical explanation in my mind. So I opened up the front door and I walked outside. However, as soon as I stepped out into the front yard, the car, which was already running, started suddenly backing up. I was not able to reach it, and the car quickly left the driveway and then drove off down the street pretty quickly. It seemed weird, but at least they were gone now. After that, I went back inside. Over the next few hours, I talked with lots of family, and soon we had our Christmas dinner. Some of us were going to take a walk around the neighborhood after, because even though there was some snow on the ground, it was a nice day and rather warm. When I got near the front door though, I was shocked to see the same SUV parked in the driveway again. I opened the door once more to go outside. When I did, once again, whoever it was backed out and then quickly drove away. This was very strange. I remember noticing also just how tinted the windows were. It was like I couldn't see anything inside. So I had obviously no idea who was driving or anything. Well, we ended up taking a walk around the neighborhood. I didn't see the car at all, and nobody else did either. We went back in after that, and everybody hung out some more. That night, people started to leave at probably around 7 or 8. By 9 o'clock, everyone was gone, and it was just me and my wife at home. Well, we were in the living room watching a movie, and my wife got up to go get something from the kitchen. However, on her way back, she went to the front of the house and passed by a window. I heard her mention that the car was there again. I walked over to the front of the house and looked outside. Once more, that same SUV was sitting in the driveway. I really couldn't believe it. We both stood there near the front door and watched it. The car was running, but nobody got out or anything. We watched it for at least 10 minutes. It was crazy. Then I had enough and I went to leave again. This time, as soon as I opened the front door, I took off and I sprinted for the SUV. However, like every other time, the car quickly backed up and then drove away. I was unable to catch up to it. I then went back inside after that. My wife and I were both very confused. For the rest of the night though, the car didn't come back, and I haven't seen the SUV since. I'm hoping that I never see it again. I still wonder about it though. 2 years ago, I went Christmas shopping at the mall with my wife. We went to this really big mall that has basically every store inside of it. We had a lot of shopping to do to buy presents for everybody in our families, including each other. After getting to the mall, we did lots of shopping for people in the family. It took hours to find all the stuff. We had our hands full with bags, so we went out to the car in the parking garage. Then we went back inside the mall after unloading. By now, it was nighttime and we were almost done shopping, but my wife and I decided to momentarily split up to try to find some gifts for each other. With how large this mall was, I figured this would be pretty easy to do. So I went to a couple of stores and I found something for her that she would really like, but I was trying to find something else as well. During this time, I remember that I was walking in the mall and randomly this woman came up to me. She literally came up from behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. I did not know who she was. The woman then told me that my wife was looking for me and her phone was dead. She went on to say that my wife was downstairs outside by the north exit and wanted to meet me there. It just seemed really weird to me. I guess my wife must have asked this woman to tell me that. The woman then walked away before I could really say anything. I didn't know why my wife would be there though. I started to go to the escalator to go downstairs, trying to make sense of this whole situation. When I was on my way down though, I decided to try calling my wife. When I did, she didn't answer her phone. This made me start to believe the woman, so I started walking for the north exit. This exit was by far the quietest one and was rarely used anymore. That's because there was no parking lot there, it was just a sidewalk. Then there was a grass area with some trees and another building of a restaurant that was connected to the mall. There had used to be a parking lot there, but when the restaurant was built, it took the place of it. I walked over to the doors and then opened them. I looked outside and I did not see my wife. It was really dark out there now with little to no lighting, just a dim street light a ways down and then light coming from the restaurant. I stepped outside fully and looked around. I still didn't see anything. But just at that point, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I took it out to see that my wife was calling me. I answered and asked her where she was. She told me that she was in the mall by the food court kind of. At that point, I quickly walked right back inside of the mall myself. My wife went on to say that she hadn't noticed that I called her, so she was calling me back. I told her about the strange woman. We were both pretty much done shopping for the most part, so we met up by the food court and then went to the car and went home. I'm still really confused about the whole thing. Was I being set up to get robbed or something? I really don't know. I don't know who the woman was or how she knew my wife and I. I'm really glad that my wife called me when she did though, or I don't know what would have happened. This happened 2 years ago at Christmas time. I worked in a pretty large office with a lot of other people. Every year, our department of about 20-something people has a little party with a gift exchange. I remember that a couple of days before the party, I went to the store to get my gift. We all drew names to see what other person we would have to buy a gift for. I drew Amanda, who was a pretty good friend of mine. While I was at the store trying to figure out what to get her, I happened to notice another coworker there. It was a guy named Mike, who, to be honest, always seemed like a pretty strange guy. He didn't really work that close to me and was in another room, but he would work in the same general area. I had heard some things about him over my time working there, and I myself had some awkward conversations with him. So when I noticed him, I really didn't want to go over and say hi, and I didn't think that he noticed me. He was just standing a good distance away and was not looking in my direction when I saw him. So I just finished my shopping and then I left the store. So when the Christmas party arrived, I got there and it was what you would expect for the most part. When it was time for the gift exchange, we all opened the things that we got for each other. The gift that I was receiving came from Mike apparently. What he got for me was a teddy bear with hearts on it. I said thanks and that it was very nice. The rest of the party went on pretty normal. Overall, it was fine, and I went home after that. For the next few days, things went on like normal, but one night I was at home by myself. I lived alone in a smaller house that I was renting in a neighborhood. I was just having a nice relaxing night to that point. When it got late though, and I was about to go to bed, I happened to glance out of a window. What I saw was what appeared to be a person quickly going behind a bush near my house in the front yard. It happened so fast that I couldn't tell who it was or anything, but obviously this was very suspicious. I was now nervous to go to bed thinking that somebody might be prowling around or trying to break in. I went and made sure that every door was locked and every window was closed, which they were. When I moved to the back of the house to check there, I heard somebody try opening the front door. That's what really got me nervous. At that point, I went over to my phone ready to call the police. Then I went to another window and I looked, but nobody was at the door any longer. Whoever it was must have moved. I wasn't sure if they had left or not, so I just kind of stayed there at the front window looking around. I didn't see anything for probably several minutes. Then I saw somebody come out from behind my car in the driveway. It was a man and he was walking closer to the house. Then I realized that it was Mike. When I saw him, I quickly moved away from the window. I couldn't believe that he was at my house. I had no idea how he would even know where I lived. Moments later, he tried the front door again. Now I decided to call the police. I dialed 911 and then went into my bedroom where I felt safer. When I was in there, I heard a loud bang at the other end of the house. I feared that Mike may have been trying to break in. I didn't know why, but he had always kind of given me the creeps. I stayed in my bedroom for the next few minutes. The police got there very fast. The next thing I knew, I heard police, and I looked out of my bedroom window and I saw several police vehicles outside. Mike was arrested for attempting to break into my house. With a further investigation, I found out that Mike did not originally have me for the gift exchange. When he found out who did, he traded with them, saying that he had the perfect idea for me. And inside the teddy bear was an AirTag, which is how he knew my location. This information really freaked me out, but I was also very glad that he had been caught. A couple of years back, I had to do some last-minute Christmas shopping, so I went to Target. I was 18 at the time, and this was the night before Christmas Eve. You see, every Christmas, my family has a bunch of people over at our house. My grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and cousins all go to my parents' house. Almost everyone gets presents for basically everyone else, so it's a lot of fun. Now, I had gone Christmas shopping several times since Thanksgiving to that point, and I had almost everybody checked off my list. The last one was the hardest person for me to shop for personally. That was my cousin Josie. She was I think 14 at the time, and I just simply forgot to get her something. Plus, being a guy, I didn't really know what kind of gifts teenage girls like. So after my parents asked me if I had made sure I had gifts for everyone, I remembered her. I headed down to the local Target, which was just down the road like 5 minutes away. I went inside, and it was not as busy as I expected. I don't recall the exact time, but it was maybe like 8 p.m. or so. It was mostly quiet, and I walked in and looked around. I didn't really know what I was looking for though. I ended up just walking around the store for like 10 minutes, hoping that something would jump out at me. Eventually though, I ended up settling on just a gift card, and then I checked out and I left the store. I had parked pretty close to the store, and almost right after walking out the doors, I noticed a man standing around by my car. It was a guy who looked fairly young, maybe 6 feet tall, and had short dark hair. He was just standing around right by my car, and I didn't know what he was doing. When I got closer though, the man started to approach me. Then he asked me if I could give him a ride. I walked past him and said no, I could not. I obviously did not want to give a ride to some random stranger that I had never met before. The man was persistent though. He walked alongside me and then cut in front. He said that he needed a ride badly and it was not that far. Nothing that he said was going to change my mind though. I told him that I could not give him a ride. He was blocking my way of getting in my car though, and I was worried that he was not going to let me in. I asked him to move and said that I was in a hurry and I was sorry, but I just couldn't do it. This seemed to work at first. The man walked around the front of my car and was no longer blocking me from getting in. He said that he understood and he was sorry for bothering me. I told him it was fine and to have a good night. Then I unlocked my car and reached for the door. By now, the man had walked around to the other side of my car, and it appeared like he was headed to maybe go inside Target. But like right after I hit the unlock button, the man swung around to the passenger side door and opened it. Then he started to go inside of my car. I had begun opening the driver's door, but I no longer went inside of it. Instead, I backed up and then closed the door. When this happened, the man then left the car as well, and quickly started walking around it, headed towards me. In an instant, just out of reaction, I turned and just started running away. I sprinted through the Target parking lot. Unfortunately, the man was chasing me away from the Target and not towards it. So when I was running, I was going farther away. I kept going, and I ended up running through the entire parking lot and then into a nearby bank parking lot which bordered the Target property.
The man was still chasing after me. The bank was closed, so I turned and ran across a quiet street where there was a strip mall way in front of the Target. I ran to a restaurant and saw that it was open, and then I went inside of it. Thankfully, the man did not follow me into the restaurant. When I was there, I waited inside and I called the police. I reported what happened, and I didn't leave the restaurant until the cops got there. They went back to my car with me, and the passenger's door was still open. However, the man was gone. He was nowhere in sight, and the police started to look around for him. I was able to go home at that point. That made for a very memorable Christmas shopping experience. This happened back on Christmas morning when I was a kid, probably around 10 years old. I lived with my parents and siblings in a house that had a main floor and then a basement as well. I was the youngest child in the family, with my older brother being 13 at the time and my older sister being 16. They each had their own bedrooms on the main level, as well as my parents. I, on the other hand, had my bedroom in the basement, which had positives and negatives to it. The basement was finished and pretty nice, so I got the most privacy, but it also got really cold down there sometimes, and it was just really far away from everything. I would walk through the basement living room area and another room that was pretty much just storage, and then I would get to the stairs. So obviously, being a 10-year-old kid, I was very excited for Christmas to arrive. I had been looking forward to it for a while. When it was Christmas morning, I remember that I woke up at probably 6-something in the morning. After waking, I got out of bed, and I was going to go upstairs and wake everybody up. After leaving my bedroom, I literally ran through the rest of the basement to the stairs. As I was running though, I was sure that I saw somebody in the storage room to my right that I would always pass by. However, I didn't look over and wasn't sure who it was. I just assumed it to either be my older brother or my father most likely. So when I got upstairs, I saw that my brother and sister were already up. They were near the Christmas tree in the living room, watching TV and looking at the tons of presents that were under the tree. I asked them if our parents were up yet, and they said no, so I went down the hallway to their bedroom to wake them. When I got into their bedroom, I woke them up, and I realized that if both my parents were in their room and my siblings were up, then who was it exactly who I had seen downstairs? This made no sense to me. I went over to my brother in the living room and told him that I thought I saw somebody downstairs. He said it was probably just our father, but I told him how it was impossible because I had just seen the guy when I went upstairs. Now that everybody in the family was awake and in the living room, I was very curious, so I decided to go back downstairs. At this point, I was thinking that maybe I was just imagining things. All the lights were off downstairs, so you couldn't really see that great anyways. Maybe I had seen a large box and mistook it for a person or something. I wanted to clear my mind, so I went back down the stairs by myself. I was like 90% sure that it was nothing. When I got downstairs, at first I heard and saw nothing. Then I got to the storage room. There were quite a few boxes and things like that in there. It was kind of cluttered. However, within a few seconds, I saw this man walk out from around the corner. It was a homeless-looking guy. He had longer hair, a long beard, and was wearing baggy clothes. As soon as I saw him, I took off running back up the stairs. I got back up and screamed that there was a man in the basement. Everyone started freaking out. There was a mix of people not believing and others confused. Within moments, though, we all heard movement downstairs. Not knowing if the guy was dangerous or not, we all went into my parents' bedroom, except for my dad. He went over to the top of the stairs and started yelling at the guy to leave and stuff. Obviously, we called the police as well. The next thing I remember was that my dad came back into the room and said that the man was gone. Apparently, the man had entered the house through a window that led to the basement sometime in the night. He had left through that same window and ran in the direction of a neighbor's. The police got there and ended up locating the man hiding behind the neighbor's house across the street. It was a huge relief knowing that he was caught, but I was extremely creeped out also knowing that I slept the entire night with a man breaking in and being in the next room over from me. That was the craziest thing to ever happen on Christmas when I was a kid. This is something that happened back when I had just recently turned 16 years old and I was in high school. I lived with my parents, my older sister who was 18 and a senior in high school, and my other older sister who was 21 and in college. So sometime in December, maybe like a week before Christmas, my older sister, the one who was 18, asked me if I wanted to go shopping with her. I had recently gotten my first job, so I had a little bit of money and I had my license, but I did not have a car yet. My sister said that we could get Christmas gifts for our parents, as well as my older sister, who was not back from college yet. I agreed and was excited to do some shopping. We had gone Christmas shopping once already, but I was not able to get anything for my parents then because they had been with us. So we went out on a Saturday and first went to this local mall. After spending some time there and getting something for our sister and my mom, we then started looking for our dad. We went to the Best Buy, I remember, which was not in the mall but a separate store. My sister and I split up in the Best Buy because I was busy looking at the video games. Best Buy was always very interesting to me when I was younger, and it still is, because of all the TVs, computers, and video games. So, as I was distracted by the video games, I remember my sister had been away from me for a while, but she came up to me and said that some creepy guy was following her around in the store. This got my attention, and I asked her about it. She motioned with her eyes to the other side of the store, and said that the guy had talked to her briefly and seemed creepy. She walked away from him, and he then kept trailing her at a distance. By now, he was like 3 aisles over and seemed to be looking at something else. This seemed kind of creepy to me as well. My sister then suggested that we leave and go somewhere else, and I agreed. So at that point, we didn't get anything and we walked for the exit of the store. When we did so, I remember noticing the man start to walk in our direction with us. He was a good distance back, so it wasn't that obvious, but it was still clear to me that he was trying to follow my sister. We walked out the doors and onto the sidewalk out front. I hadn't really expected the man to leave the store with us, but he did. My sister went to the right and walked along the sidewalk instead of going to the car. I think she was afraid that if we went to the car, the man would follow us home or try to do something. There were other stores that were right next to the Best Buy and stuff though, thankfully, so we walked along the sidewalk until we reached one. It was a large clothing store that was next to the Best Buy, and my sister and I then walked inside of it. Unfortunately, the man following us did the same thing. He even entered the store as well, but he was still a good ways back. My sister told me that she had an idea. When we turned a corner, she quickly took out her car keys and put them in my hand. She told me to split up with her and then leave the store and go get her car, then to park out front and she would then leave. So I then turned and I walked in a different direction than my sister. The man continued to follow her as I walked off. Then I left the store. I walked over to the Best Buy parking lot and then I found my sister's Jeep and got inside. Then I drove around to the entrance of the clothing store and I parked on the side of the curb near the sidewalk out front. I waited for her there. I was there for probably 2 or 3 minutes. Then I saw my sister come walking out of the store very quickly. She then ran all the way to the passenger side door and quickly got inside. I saw the man walking out of the store right after she got in. She told me to step on it and I drove away out of the parking lot. The man was not able to follow us. Most likely his car was still at the Best Buy parking lot. I drove us back home after that, and looking back, that was a scary situation. I'm really glad that I was able to help my sister get away from that guy. Last year, I went to a Christmas party with some friends. I have a pretty large friend group that I've had for years. Most of us live in the same general area, and Jim and Vanessa, who recently got married, live in a really nice apartment building. They're part of the friend group, and they decided to host the Christmas party last year in the recreation room of their apartment building. You can rent out the room, and it's very nice and also large. There's a kitchen and dining room and stuff, so it's popular for parties of all kinds. So I went to the party, and there was probably 30 to 40 people that wound up coming. So many that I didn't even know all of them that well, but I at least recognized everybody, and most of them I did know very well. We talked, had food, drank, and had a very good time. I remember though, there was this one woman who I did not recognize at all. She was the only person at the party where I had no idea who she was. I thought maybe she was somebody's girlfriend who had just recently started dating or something, but she didn't really seem to be with anyone. I would see her on and off during the party. I never got around to saying hi to her or having a conversation and asking who she was or anything though. Eventually, people started to leave the party. I would say that there were maybe 15 or 20 people still there when I left, so a good amount. When I was leaving, I remember noticing the woman sitting by herself, sort of in the corner of the room. After I left, I walked out of the apartment into my car. Then I started to drive back to my own apartment, which was like 10 minutes away. Well, the strangest thing happened. That very same woman ended up following me home.
I hadn't noticed anything at all until I pulled up to a red light and was like maybe 2 minutes from my place. When I stopped, I just casually looked in my mirror at the car behind me. I saw that in the driver's seat it looked like the same woman. I didn't know what to make of this, but from that point on, I paid attention to her driving. She made all the same turns as me. It was very confusing. Soon, she was turning into my apartment complex along with me. I was pretty confident that she did not live in my building or anything. I had never seen her at all before. So I drove around the parking lot with her still behind me. I parked my car in the space that I usually did. The woman drove a little ways past, and then I saw her parking in an open space a ways away. I got out of my car and started walking for the door. I heard a car door open and close and glanced over to see the woman then walking in my direction. I went faster and I made it inside a good time before she would reach the door. After getting in, I went up a flight of stairs and then looked out of a window outside. The woman was standing near the door, indicating that she did not have a key to get in. Then I went to my apartment. I texted a few friends about it and I put in the group chat asking who the woman was. Well, nobody had any idea. Everybody just kind of assumed that someone else knew her. But it turns out not a single person at the party knew who she was, and then she ended up following me home. After that, I haven't seen her since. The next time I left my apartment, she was gone, and so was her car. I'm still very confused about it. This is something that happened back when I was in high school. It was the night before Christmas, and I was at home. My family and I were in the living room, wrapping gifts and watching Christmas specials. This went on for a while, but at about 11 o'clock or so, I remember that there was a knock on the front door. This was really weird because it was late at night on Christmas Eve. We weren't expecting anybody, so why would someone be knocking on the door? I decided to get up and go and see who it was. I remember that I walked over to the front window and looked out. I saw a man standing there, but I didn't recognize him, so I walked away. I told everyone that it was some guy who I didn't know. The man was not a neighbor that I was aware of, but I didn't really think too much of it in the moment. I just went back to what I was doing before. However, about 30 minutes later, there was a knock on the door again. Once more, I got up to go see. This time, though, I was feeling more suspicious. I didn't think whoever had been there would come back. When I got to the window, I looked out of it, and I saw that not only was the same guy there again, but another man was now with him. Two guys now stood right outside the front door. This time they knocked again. My parents started to walk over from the other room, because they were also curious. We all looked out the window for some time at the men, and we were very confused as to why they were there, but ultimately we decided not to answer the door. After the men stood around for like a minute, they finally turned to walk away. But the men were not walking back towards the direction of the street. Instead, the men were both walking around towards the side of our house. At that point, my dad opened up the front door and yelled at them. But this didn't stop the guys. They kept going around all the way to the back end of the house. Now they seemed to be somewhere in the backyard. We then went around to the back of the house. We had a sliding glass door back there that led out to the patio. The yard was not all that big, but there were some trees and bushes back there and stuff. My mom turned on the light and we looked out, but we didn't see the guys. My dad briefly opened a window and yelled at them again. There was no response and we didn't see the men anymore at all. After looking around the yard from the windows for a while, we concluded that the men probably ran away. Most likely they went through another neighbor's backyard or something and took off. We all returned to what we had been doing once again and hanging out in the living room. I was just really curious about it for some reason. So I remember that I decided to go outside and look around, which was a stupid decision. I left the house out the back sliding door and looked around the yard. It was dark out other than the patio light, obviously, so I couldn't see that great, but things were completely silent. I took a few more steps out into the yard. Then, suddenly, out of nowhere, I saw these two guys come out from behind a tree in the back of the yard. They both started running straight for me at full speed. I turned around and out of pure instincts ran as fast as I ever have before for the door, and then I went back inside. I closed the door behind me and locked it just before the men reached it. They tried opening the door and then banged on the doors briefly and then ran away again. This time we called the police. The men did not return though. When the cops got there, the guys were gone and they looked around. They came up empty-handed at our house, but actually located the men walking along a street a few blocks away. I don't know why those men chose to go to our house. I think they were just looking around for a house to rob or something, but I'll never forget seeing them run at me though. It was one of the scariest moments of my life.